The bikie gangs have imposed a discipline on crime that perhaps a lot of other groups didn't have.
He allegedly shot up a car yard and then travelled to Canberra and was involved in a particularly brutal brawl at the Capital Strip Club in the suburb of Fyshwick. Now, that was all in the space of a few months. So, after that...
Very busy year.
Why have a clubhouse if all that's going to happen is it's going to be raided?
Yeah, not good. I'm Andrew Rule, this is Life and Crimes. We're doing a summer series over the next few weeks. It's a special series which gives us a chance to invite into the studio two of Melbourne's top crime reporters, both of whom contribute to the Deadline column, but who, of course, have been writing big crime stories and small crime stories for the better part of 30 years. Regular listeners will know that Deadline is a weekly crime column with scuttlebutt, news and views of a crimey nature, which runs midweek every week and has built a loyal following, which is exactly what Mark Buttler thought it would do when he came up with the idea. On our left, we have Mark Buttler, who in fact has contributed about 89% of all Deadline items for the last 18 months.
Hello.
On my right, we have a fellow called Dowsley, who has contributed very little to Deadline, but
nothing at all.
But has promised to change his ways in the new year.
Hello.
He's here because he knows things that he hasn't yet divulged, and today he's going to divulge some of them, we hope. We aim to do episodes over summer, looking at the more colourful characters of the year of 2021, and we're going to start with everyone's favourite topic, bikies. Anthony Dowsley. Obviously, one of the biggest stories of the year to do with bikies was ANOM, what we call ANOM, or Operation Ironside. Can you recall how that got rolling?
This is the new world of crime-breaking investigation. The Australian Federal Police and the FBI in America joined forces to create basically an app which would be a communication device like SMS or anything like that, but it's encrypted, and it was basically shown to the underworld, especially the Comanchero bikie gang, one of Australia's most powerful bikie gangs, which is a worldwide bikie gang now. Yeah. And they began using it to do nefarious things.
They took the bait.
They took the bait.
Is this the revenge of the nerds? Have we got, blokes in dirty T-shirts and glasses and sneakers sitting in Silicon Valley or somewhere, or in their own apartments, creating these things, and then they use it as burley to drag the big, muscly, tough guy bikies in? That's what they did.
It is the revenge of the nerds.
That's magnificent.
And in the revenge of the nerds, they end up getting the girls.
Did they?
Yes, they did.
How did they do that?
Well, they were smarter than the rest of them. So the jocks lost out,
and
the nerds won. And this hasn't been one yet, but there's been numerous arrests.
Can you expand on that?
Well,
can you expand on them getting the girls?
Well, it's a story about how looks don't mean everything. And with ANOM, it looked good, but it was very bad for those who wanted to use it. And there were arrests all over the place. Nationwide, the coverage was sterlingly done in the end by a News Corp reporter, Ellen Winnett.
Yeah.
And we got the exclusive on how this encrypted app foiled an entire gang.
Does this show us
and
that
others.
We're all of us now, to a greater or lesser extent, hooked on devices, particularly phones, and no one can sort of live without them? It's sort of they're like an extension of our hands and eyes and mouths. And that when you can show the bad guys a purported way to avoid detection, they just can't get enough of it. Well, it's the most seductive thing.
Oh, there's a few seductive things in the bikie world.
What?
It's not old school anymore.
No.
It's changed.
Yeah.
The boundaries, you used to have an area where a bikie club, you couldn't go into it if you're another bikie club unless you wanted a huge confrontation. I'm told that's almost over.
Right.
Bikies love designer clothes.
Yeah.
What else do they want? A very nice watch,
Nice watch.
a gold chain or two.
And not just motorbikes. They like cars.
They like nice cars, Lamborghinis.
They like big gym muscles.
They like big gym muscles, and
They like female friends with large muscles.
they do. They like females. And what else do they like? They like phones.
They love phones.
They love phones.
And they like drugs, both to sell and for their own consumption.
Yeah. And
And
This is
phones are essential to all of the above.
well, because it's a worldwide operation.
Of course
now.
it is. Yeah, yep.
And
Okay.
they don't all meet in clubhouses. Some clubs are going away from the clubhouse sort of idea.
Model. They're away from that. They're now virtual clubhouses.
Well, there's a city, what they call a chapter now. The Hells Angels have one in Melbourne.
Yeah,
No clubhouse.
just a postcode.
It's a virtual entity.
It's a little bit like it's a pandemic thing, isn't it? We're all working from elsewhere.
Why have a clubhouse if all that's going to happen is it's going to be raided?
Yeah, not good, not sensible. It centralises everything they've got so the coppers can keep an eye on them.
Now, Andrew, there was a
Yeah.
man in Melbourne over the last couple of years named Hassan Tapa.
Yes.
A good-looking fella.
Yeah.
A good-looking rooster, as they would say.
Yeah.
Former Chadwick's model.
I know a bloke sitting here who knows a bit about him.
Well, yes.
And that is a bloke called Mark Buttler, who, as mentioned, has supplied a vast wealth of material for Deadline. And in fact, without Mark Buttler, there would be no Deadline. So he's going to tell us about Hassan Tapa because I reckon he knows quite a bit about him, possibly even more than has been written. Would that be right, Butsy?
No, it's probably about the limit, I think, yeah.
Oh, it's about the
Yeah,
limit,
I've
is it?
probably put just about all of it in, I think.
You've taken it right to wherever it can go. That's a message from our lawyers, is it? Or for our
Well,
lawyers?
yes. Hassan Tapa was a fella from the northern suburbs who sort of exploded onto the scene in 2017.
Yeah.
Now, as Anthony and I revealed in a story in July of this year, he was very busy through that year, allegedly. He's a suspect in 2 mistaken identity killings. He's under investigation over the shooting of a former Comanchero turned Mongol who somehow survived and has kicked on with the Mongols. He's quite an influential player now. He's been looked at over the shooting of 2 banditos on top of the Balti Bridge as they headed from the northern suburbs to Geelong.
Yeah.
He allegedly shot up a car yard and then travelled to Canberra and was involved in a particularly brutal brawl at the Capital Strip Club in the suburb of Fyshwick. Now, that was all in the space of a few months. So after that...
Very busy year.
Yeah, very.
2007.
So he's sent to prison for some time. Yeah. And in early autumn, probably 2019, he's headed overseas and hasn't returned. He's obviously got some issues here with law enforcement. I'd like to catch up with him, probably as would those banditos and the fella that he shot, the former friend.
He's got several dogs tied up here.
Yes. So he's one of the factors in Operation Ironside, one of the key Melbourne elements of it. I don't know whether they've picked him up on the ANOM, but getting back to ANOM, these gangs are transnational organisations now and they have to be able to communicate, and these kind of apps are essential, and that was shown with one of the arms of the operation which focused on a Melbourne trafficking gang which were using ANOM to communicate with a connection in Los Angeles, I think.
Yeah.
And they were using some very frank language, allegedly, about importing large amounts of cocaine and methamphetamine into Melbourne. The discussions were frank enough to outline the kind of profits that they thought that they could make. The markups are unbelievable if you can get these drugs into Australia, maybe 8-10-fold. It's no wonder Australia's so attractive. The country's got an inexhaustible appetite for drugs and will pay top dollar.
Which explains the rise of bikie gangs, really, doesn't it?
Well,
it comes down to that.
Not just them, but they are well connected internationally.
Yeah.
A lot of them are. A lot of these gangs have chapters in, multiple countries. It's important for them to have chapters in multiple countries. yeah, some of these conversations were quite revealing about the kind of money they thought they could make.
I don't want to get off, just want to expand on this a little bit. You know, we always crack jokes for years and years about disorganised crime, that crime wasn't that organised. But it strikes me that the bikies are highly organised, that crime has become very organised with a sort of a hierarchy, semi-military lines, that the bikie gangs have imposed a discipline on crime that perhaps a lot of other groups didn't have, but with notable exceptions like the mafia.
Probably Hassan Tapa could be a notable exception. And there's been other instances in other gangs over the years where people have got off the chain and probably acted against the interests of the broader gang and brought a lot of heat onto their organisation for very little gain.
Yeah.
And he's probably allegedly a prime example.
Do you believe that's just one hot-headed bloke who's under the influence of drugs himself or whatever, or was he doing stuff at the behest of someone else for playing a different game and a bigger game?
Well, I think it's believed by some law enforcement bodies that he was following instructions. He was
a disruptor,
an ambitious fellow. He was promoted fairly well.
Yeah.
But if you're wanting to do business, it's handy not to bring unwanted police attention onto you by shooting up car yards or committing mistaken identity killings or shooting people on bridges.
Yeah,
there's no need for it.
No need for it.
Some would say.
Shooting the wrong people would strike nearly everyone as not a win. It makes you look dumb.
You're going from, in that situation, you're going from the group being scrutinised by the Echo Task Force to having the homicide squad on your back as well.
Yeah, so not smart.
Not great.
Not great. And it doesn't really bring you great kudos because you become the gang that can't shoot straight. It's not as if anyone thinks you're a hero for shooting some poor kid that was playing a computer 10 minutes earlier.
Yes, it's
not a good
but I don't think they're out to win a PR war or anything.
No.
My understanding is that some elements of that organisation were unhappy about some of the stuff that was going on.
You'd think older, wiser heads think it was stupid.
Or people who, conduct their business
more covertly.
Discreetly.
Discreetly, yeah. Mm-hmm. Good word. Now, Hassan Tapa, what do we know about him? Anthony mentioned he'd done a bit of modelling with the Chadwick Agency, and I think you've discovered that some time ago that he'd been he'd sort of come to it accidentally because somebody took photos of him and showed somebody some pictures, and he was sort of a bit of an amateur model who did a little bit of professional work. What else do we know about him? He comes from a fairly stable background, is that right? I think, sort of reasonably respectable family, reasonably well educated. I think he had tertiary qualifications, all that sort of stuff.
I don't know a great deal about his background prior to 2017.
Yeah.
He's clearly somebody who's fairly handy with his fists.
Yeah.
And he's somebody whose behaviour could be quite threatening, I would think, given what happened at the Capital Strip Club where
in Canberra.
In Canberra. Things erupted there. He's a good-looking rooster.
Yeah.
It would be a surprising sort of fellow to be smashing a glass into his forehead.
So this is 3 o'clock in the morning.
As a gesture of aggression.
And he sort of does this as more or less as staking his territory or making a scene or, showing off, essentially, breaking a glass on his forehead.
Some people might say, hold my beer. Some people might smash a pot into their forehead.
And he smashed the pot in his forehead and then he knocked somebody over and then came back for seconds, is that right? According to the CCTV.
It was a pretty brutal incident, yeah.
And he and a few others were charged over it, weren't they?
Yes, and he did a bit of time.
He did a bit of time over it. And I think the judge or magistrate in Canberra took a dim view and said this was the serious end of offending because it was premeditated, and then not only they knocked this guy over, they've kicked him and then they've come back and had another go and so on and so forth. So it was pretty brutal.
An unnecessary level of violence.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, the star of the show, ANOM, was a bikie linked to the Comancheros. He's the Facebook bikie, they call him, named Hassan Tapa. And he's the one, they say, was mainly responsible for introducing the encrypted app to the Comancheros. Hakan Ayek is an interesting person in this Operation Ironside ANOM because he is the one who began with this encrypted device. He's the one they infiltrated.
Right. They used him as the...
He was one of the ones to pick up on it.
As the bellwether.
He was one of the early adopters.
Yeah, early adopter.
And if anyone out there isn't sure what an encrypted device or an app is, I'm sure most people know what an app is, but it's the equivalent of adopting some sort of a communication device that is basically a police microphone.
Yep.
You are talking directly to the police when you are trying to courier or traffic drugs all over the world.
It's magnificent.
Now, one of the interesting aspects of what would be going through the Comancheros' minds when they found out that one of their own guys had basically sucked them all into talking into a police microphone.
Yeah, they'd be very savage. I don't think
so.
that's
Where is Hakan Ayek?
Low profile, or do you think no profile? What's your bet?
At the moment, very low profile.
Low profile,
but
as opposed to no profile.
Yeah.
You don't think he's lost his head yet?
No,
he's just below the parapet.
Yeah, I don't think he'd be worried.
He'd be worried.
I don't know.
Yeah,
if he's
you'd have
moved
to be
countries.
worried to want to live in rural Turkey.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but...
Where was he? Was that where he was in rural Turkey, or was he in one of the Emirate states?
Oh, was he?
I thought Ayak was in Turkey,
Okay.
in a fancy hotel complex.
Right, yep. There is another man police would like to catch up with, and
Who's
I don't know
that?
if it's true,
Yeah.
but he's known as
that's not a problem.
That's not a problem here, but he's known as the richest bikie going around, which I find hard to believe.
Who's that?
Mark Butler.
Mark? Oh, yes, Mark. Not Mark. Butler.
No.
He's with us, and he's not a bikie,
Yeah.
and he's not particularly wealthy, he claims. Well, he masquerades as... He puts on a bit of an act, but Mark Butler, he might also put on an act.
Yes.
He's... what's the source of his wealth, do you think? What would you allege?
Well, there were some stories going around, and I might have written one of them or helped write one of them, that he set up. So he's a Sydney man,
Yes.
but he spent a bit of time in Melbourne. He's done a bit of prison time here. I think he got in a fight again, a strip club fight from memory.
Strip club.
Think
Fancy
so.
That, yeah.
Yes, he did.
But he went overseas, like some of these guys tend to do,
Yeah.
and he set up this thing called the Commission.
Right. Good
And
name.
the Commission was trying to basically run drugs into Australia, but anyone who wanted to get their drugs, any syndicate, whether it be Bikie or not, would have to pay a tax to the Commission, Buttler's Commission,
Really?
allegedly,
That would seem
to get it through the port.
That's a pretty daring game plan.
I don't
You'd
know
wonder- you'd
how
wonder-
they come up with that kind of a game plan, but
You'd have to offer some very good service at the other end of that and say, well, if you do pay me, we can, or pay us, we'll make sure that X, Y, and Z happens.
well, it's basically
Such
the
as-
Bikie gang, the Comancheros, saying, I'm the tax man.
Yeah.
And if you want to get something into the country, maybe not just Sydney's port, but Melbourne's port or any other port,
Does that imply
you gotta
that,
pay us.
that these guys either have certain key personnel at ports on tap or imply that they have?
well, it implies not only
They-
that, but it implies that they have such control or perceived control of what's his knowledge of what is coming into the country that they can try and force other syndicates.
To
Not all the drugs come in through the bikies. I mean, there's big syndicates that don't involve them.
Of course.
That's
That's
the
interesting.
mafia and others.
Interesting they get that sort of mail
Well, it was just
about each other's activity.
It was such an interesting concept that they would set up a tax
It
on
is.
illegal product.
It is. Of course, the mafia have done that for several hundred years. They love the idea of, cornering the onion market or whatever it might be. You may recall that, we're not going to talk about it now, but you
Are
may-
we back to the 40s with the onion market?
Well, hey, you remember a man that was employed by Coles to clean up the
Oh, yeah.
veggie, and he
Yes,
was shot
yes.
in the guts at his front door in Ivanhoe, I do believe,
Uh-huh. Yep.
for the very reason that the people that shot him represented those who wanted to charge, $1 a box for tomatoes or whatever. So
Yep.
it's not a new thing.
Yeah.
Buttler would probably be less ruthless than the ATO.
Well, that's probably they're relentless. The ATO,
relentless. And almost honest.
Not that I would ever have anything to say about them in case they're listening.
No, we love the ATO.
The last known whereabouts of Buttler before Ironside, all was cracked open.
Yeah.
Was Dubai.
Why do they go to Dubai? What's with Dubai? I've been there and I can't see the attraction. But anyway,
I've never stepped out of the airport. Can you have a drink over there?
I think behind closed doors you could have whatever you liked.
That might be the attraction.
Not officially, but unofficially, yes, indeed. Would you suggest that your children take up being bikies, or is it a bit risky? If you run through it, on one side, there's a chance to make a lot of illicit money, but on the other, there's a downside. People might kill you. And we have seen the last year or more, we have seen some untimely deaths in the bikie world, haven't we? Was there a bloke called Shane Bowden, who's I think he might have been a former schoolboy cycling champion?
Some fellas were arrested earlier this year over the
alleged
murder of Bowden on the Gold Coast in late 2020.
Yep.
Now, Bowden had been, for whatever reason, found himself on the outer in the period prior to that. He got out of jail in, I think, June 2020, and he had the full escort from his club mates with the Mongols back to Melbourne with the stretched limo and all the Harleys, and he was like a foreign dignitary. But for whatever reason, maybe 15 days later, I think he was shot in a driveway out at Epping, which left him with a nasty leg wound and got him thinking about heading interstate. So he headed to Queensland.
He broke a lot of COVID rules, didn't he?
Yes, he had some issues with the COVID. He may have had COVID, I think, and had some issues flying up there. He had to go into quarantine and so forth.
Super spreader.
Yeah, accused of telling porkies about it.
Right.
I'm not sure that he did tell porkies, but anyway, he's dead, so it doesn't matter.
And he was executed as he got out of his car one night up there later that year. I think it might have been October or November.
Had he been to the gym that night and was coming home at midnight?
Oh, I think that rings
Is this
a bell,
proof
yes.
that going to the gym can be dangerous for you? Well, it makes you a predictable target, doesn't it? You go in at a certain time, you come out at a certain time, you drive home at midnight, and kablooey. Now, I've
never tried it.
You've never tried it. You know what a gymnasium is? Yeah, it's a place
It's called
where
the
they lift
Gime,
weights.
isn't it?
Yeah, that's right, a Gime. So Bowden has got offside with people who, politically want him removed.
Well, it had that look. Yes.
Did have that look.
Not random.
Would this be because he had switched sides once too often?
When he was released from prison at Loddon and got the full escort with the limo and everything and the champagne, and he stayed a night at a nice hotel that night. The Mongol club helped him, put him up in a place, and
had a bit of company.
And from what I heard, Bowden wasn't really interested in playing second fiddle to anyone at the Mongols, and wanted to be back in business in a pretty senior spot.
Right.
And it wasn't going to go down well with those who had taken
taken
those
the reins.
spots,
Okay.
taken the reins.
Yeah.
And that led to him...
led to ill feeling.
Yeah, to ill feeling, and that's what's thought to have led to the shooting in Epping. When he's off to hospital, word was that he left pretty early because he thought that maybe it wouldn't be a very good place to stay,
Right.
where they could get him.
Yeah. Do you think it was meant to be shot dead at Epping and they just missed, or was this a warning to shoot him in the leg?
I think it was probably a warning.
Yeah. You think?
But he was out of the club.
The Epping thing did look like a warning because he was in a driveway, he was unarmed, he was, it would have been a sitting duck if they had wanted to kill
It'd be
him.
easy to kill.
It's probably more your traditional northern suburbs,
Shot in the leg, don't know why.
non-fatal shooting, make your own way to hospital sort of situation.
Don't know what happened. I've just got a bullet in the leg.
Yeah.
It seems to happen just in certain postcodes, by and large, those shootings. I think you're right.
There's been a lot of it in the north, yes.
But it happens everywhere as well. It's
It
not
happens
strictly
everywhere
there.
as
It's not strictly in the north.
Oh, okay. Right.
But there's a lot there. But what happened later is that he think he tried to re-engage with the club he was formerly with, the Finks.
Yeah.
And he was famous with the Finks, Shane Bowden, because he was one of the main instigators in what they called the
Ballroom Blitz.
The Ballroom Blitz. That's right, Andrew. And
At the Pacific Pines.
Yeah,
something
now we're
or other.
going back in history a while, maybe 2007 or something like that.
Yeah, a fair while ago.
Maybe even earlier. And that was a kickboxing match.
Was.
And there were some Hells Angels there, and there were some Finks there, and there'd been a defector, or what they said was a defector, and his name was Christopher Hudson, and he would become infamous in Melbourne for murdering people. Anyway, Shane Bowden shot Christopher Hudson at that kickboxing event, and he survived.
Sadly didn't use it large
And they
enough.
both ended up in Melbourne later on.
We might leave it there for now, but there's more to this conversation, and we might return to the topic of bikies very soon.
Sounds good.
Thanks for listening. Life and Crimes is a Sunday Herald Sun production for True Crime Australia. Our producer is John Burton. And if you want to know more about these stories, links are in the description of this episode.